I'm going to be reading a few things from books which will help shed light on the plan now coming into view, which most people refer to as the New World Order. Certain authors have made uncanny predictions as to what the future would be, and then this future has come to pass. One of these, sort of an overview, is an anecdotal story given by Dr. Lawrence Dunnigan of a March 20th, 1969 speech by Dr. Richard Day to a small group of physicians about what was going to be taking place in the coming decades leading up to the turn of the century. Dr. Dunnigan made public what he had heard in 1989, and even since then, certain concepts have come true that were not a reality in 1989. And one of these things that I want to start with is what we do on the computer and through cell phones now, about using it to order things through like Amazon, how that's become more commonplace. And we have like Cyber Monday, and certain people have talked about this for quite a long time. It's the cybernetic aspect of things. This is from page 255 of From Newspeak to Cyberspeak. This is a quote from the Soviet Deputy Minister of Defense Axel Berg in 1961. There's this quote: "When the computer enters our home, there will be no need to call a doctor. The machine will tell you what to do. Students will not have to go to some place and listen to hideous lectures of old pensioners who know nothing. Programs will be optimized, and you will have connections with the machine, which will come to your home as water and light did. If someone does not believe it, let him commit suicide. This is the future, and we will fight for it. We will weed out anybody who would interfere." And he also says in Cultures of Control, page 253, "We will build communism on the basis of the most broad use of electronic machines. These machines, aptly called cybernetic machines, will provide the solution of the problem of permanent optimal planning and control." And here I want to say that many people become angry at the idea of human reality being controlled or manipulated. They see themselves as beyond all that, beyond manipulation, and that they could never be a part of that, and that it would be common knowledge. And it is. And they're actively denying it through the encouragement of the media. So here I'm going to read a quote from Dr. Lawrence Dunnigan about what he heard from Dr. Richard Day, who was giving a speech. Quote, "You'll be watching television, and somebody will be watching you at the same time at a central monitoring stations. Television sets would have a device to enable this. The TV set would not have to be on in order for this to be operative. Also, the television can be used to monitor what you are watching. People can tell what you're watching on TV and how you are reacting to what you're watching. And you would not know that you were being watched while you were watching television." He goes on to say, "Just the way people are dependent on the phone today. One thing the television would be used for would be purchases. You wouldn't have to leave your home to purchase. You just turn on your TV and there would be a way of interacting with your television channel and the store that you wanted to purchase. And you could flip the switch from place to place and choose a refrigerator or clothing. And this would be both convenient, but it would also make you dependent on your television, so the built-in monitor would be something you could not do without. There was some discussion of audio monitors too, just in case the authorities wanted to hear what was going on in the rooms other than where the television monitor was. In regard to this, the statement was made, any wire that went into your house, for example, your telephone wire, could be used in this way." So this is an example of technology being used to monitor people. And this goes back in time. People wonder how long this sort of planning has gone on. And a couple centuries is logical. You can see the Industrial Revolution, where if it had not been planned before, it would have been planned then. And you can see the advances coming up. But it goes back even further than that. The father of modern science, Francis Bacon, who wrote some things that are just like impossible to read, uh, the New Organon and stuff. But he wrote a book called The New Atlantis, which is fairly straightforward. It's about a ship that gets lost at sea. They pull into this large island, essentially a continent, and they eventually meet the king of this place, which seems very nice. And he tells them about everything that is going on. And he describes their society. And one of the things he talks about, many people think that the New Atlantis is the New World, United States, Central, South America, the New World, New Atlantis. So, in one of the quotes here, this is from 1625, this was written. We have sound houses, where we practice and demonstrate all sounds and their generation. We have harmonies which you have not, of quarter sounds, and lesser slides of sounds, and diverse instruments of music, likewise unknown to you, some sweeter than any you have, together with bells and rings that are dainty and sweet. We represent small sounds as great and deep, likewise great sounds as thin and sharp. We make diverse tremblings and warblings of sounds, which in their original are entire. We represent and imitate and we represent and imitate all articulate sounds and letters, and the voices and notes of beasts and birds. We have certain helps, which applied to the ear do further hearing greatly. We also have diverse strange and artificial echoes, reflecting the voice many times, and as it were tossing it, and some that give back the voice louder than it came, some shriller and deeper, some rendering the voice differing in the letters or articulate sounds from that they receive. We also have means to convey sound in tubes and pipes in irregular lines and distances. I mean, that is amazing to me. I don't see how you could not see that they knew more in advance, way ahead of time, and probably from the previous civilization. You know, pre-Babylon, whatever that was, that civilization that came before the flood. Another book is called When the Sleeper Wakes by H.G. Wells. It's about a man who, this book was written in 1899, maybe 1895, but he falls asleep for 200 years, and he wakes up in the future. He's been in a state of suspended animation and is an object of curiosity to everyone. He becomes part of the speech. You know, that'll happen when the sleeper wakes, you know, which is never to most people. But he awakes, and then he's in this world, and they're trying to figure out what to do with him now that he's awake because he's confused. Society is shifting because he's awake now. But he's held in a room, and I'll read from this. He's looking around the room, and I'll quote, he observed one entire side of the outer room was set with rows of peculiar double cylinders inscribed with green lettering on white that harmonized with the decorative scheme of the room, and in the center of this projected a little apparatus about a yard square, having a white smooth face to the room. A chair faced this. He had a transitory idea that these cylinders might be books, or a modern substitute for books, but at first it did not seem so. The lettering on the cylinders puzzled him. At first sight it seemed like Russian. Then he noticed a suggestion of mutilated English about certain of the words. Man would be king was forced on him as the man who would be king. Phonetic spelling, he said. He remembered reading a story with that title. Then he recalled the story vividly, one of the best stories in the world. But this thing before him was not a book as he understood it. He puzzled over the title of the two adjacent cylinders, The Heart of Darkness. He had never heard of that before, nor The Madonna of the Future. No doubt if they were indeed stories, they were by post-Victorian authors. He puzzled over this peculiar cylinder for some time and replaced it. Then he turned to the square apparatus and examined that. He opened a sort of lid and found one of the double cylinders within, and the upper edge and on the upper edge a little stud like the stud of an electric bell. He pressed this, and a rapid clicking began and ceased. He became aware of voices and music, and noticed a play of color on the smooth front face. He suddenly realized what this might be and stepped back to regard it. On the flat surface was now a little picture, very vividly colored, and in this picture were figures that moved. Not only did they move, but they were conversing in clear small voices. It was exactly like reality viewed through an inverted opera glass and heard through a long tube. His interest was seized at once by the situation, which presented a man pacing up and down and vociferating angry things to a pretty but petulant woman. Both were in the picturesque costume that seemed so strange to Graham. "I have worked," said the man. "But what have you been doing?" "Ah," said Graham. He forgot everything else and sat down on the chair. At last the miniature drama came to an end, and the square face of the apparatus was blank again. It was a strange world in which he had been permitted to see, unscrupulous, pleasure-seeking, energetic, subtle, a world, too, of dire economic struggle, and there were illusions he did not understand, incidents that conveyed strange suggestions of altered moral ideals, flashes of dubious enlightenment. The blue canvas, which everyone wears, that bulks so largely in his first impression of the city ways, appeared again and again as the costume of the common people. He had no doubt the story was contemporary, and its intense realism was undeniable, and the end had been a tragedy that oppressed him. He sat staring at the blankness. He started and rubbed his eyes. He had been so absorbed in the latter-day substitute for a novel that he awoke to the little green and white room with more than a touch of surprise of his first awakening. A little later on, he goes back to the machine. He went back to the apparatus in the other room, and had soon puzzled out the method of replacing the cylinders by others. As he did so, it came to his mind that it must be these little appliances had fixed the language so that it was still clear and understandable after 200 years. The haphazard cylinders he substituted displayed a musical fantasia. At first it was beautiful, and then it was sensuous. He presently recognized what appeared to him as an altered version of the story of Tannhauser. The music was unfamiliar, but the rendering was realistic, and with a contemporary unfamiliarity. Tannhauser did not go to a Venusberg, but to a pleasure city. What was a pleasure city? A dream, surely, the fancy of a fantastic, voluptuous writer. He became interested, curious. The story developed with the flavor of strangely twisted sentimentality. Suddenly he did not like it. He liked it less as it proceeded. He had a revulsion of feeling. These were no pictures, no idealizations, but photographed realities. He wanted no more of the 22nd century Venusberg. He forgot the part played by the model in 19th century art, and gave way to an archaic indignation. He rose angry and half ashamed at himself for witnessing even this in solitude. He pulled forward the apparatus and with some violence sought for a means of stopping its action. Something snapped. A violent spark stung and convulsed his arm, and the thing was still. When he attempted next day to replace these Tannhauser cylinders by another pair, he found the apparatus broken. I just find that to be very interesting. Like, that in 1899, let's say, the concept of this, a flat white screen where you put in, like what probably would be a VCR type thing, that it's explained so clearly. It's very amazing. Well, I'll end this section with what he says next. He struck out a path oblique to the room, and paced to and fro, struggling with intolerable vast impressions. The things he had derived from the cylinders, and the things he had seen, conflicted, confused him. It seemed to him the most amazing thing of all that in his 30 years of life he had never tried to shape a picture of these coming times. We were making the future, he said, and hardly any of us troubled to think what future we were making. And here it is.